Okay, so the second part here, I'm going to move through a little bit quicker because I've covered all the major concepts and they just become repetitive at this point. So if we're talking about a double slit here, we're talking about two holes in a barrier. All right. So again, they will vary. The width of them will vary as to what happens on the other side, but the same premise or what I'm more interested in happening, it'll be the same. So I'm not going to do the high frequency, low frequency, wide slit, narrow slit analysis because I'm more interested in just pointing out what does result. So obviously the waves that strike the barrier will be reflected back. All right. What about the waves that pass through? Well, we already know that from the previous slide, we talked about the single slit acting like a point source. So it ends up spreading out as such. Well, the other slit then will do the exact same thing. So what results then is that interference pattern that we saw earlier in the first video, where you have your areas of constructive and destructive interference. So you'll have those areas or dead zones that I talked about. And for example, they will occur, where are they going to occur in this case here? It's going to be so those areas where there are dead zones are going to happen roughly through here. So there's destructive interference, there's destructive interference, approximately. I'm just kind of estimating with my rough diagram where they'll occur. Okay, so you get regions again of destructive interference, or getting nodal lines, right? Those areas where we have complete destructive interference, there are nodal lines. So double slit is like taking our 2 point sources and cutting it in half. It's only half the situations occurring. All right. Moving along, talking about obstacles. So what happens when we put an obstacle in front of a plane wave? We'll deal with plane waves to start with. So there's two scenarios. We'll put the full plane in, and then let's put a part wall in. So let's look at the plane wave as it comes and strikes. I want it to be a little bit wider. It's going to strike a wall. You're going to have, again, the waves that strike that barrier are going to reflect back. You're going to have some waves, though, that do get around the wall. And again, it depends on the frequency. But what happens is the edges or the corners, so I'll emphasize, okay, it's like you walking by a wall. If you strike your shoulder against the wall, it kind of turns you. So what happens is that friction or contact causes our wave to spread out. Similarly, on the other side, we get that pattern, and then eventually what happens is that those waves connect and will end up continuing on. We end up with kind of a, call it a dead zone or a cone, where there is no waves at all. All right. But the waves then join up later on, okay, over here. So those waves will join up and create a wave afterwards. All right. If down below here we only have a half wall, so that means the waves are going to strike our wall here. A portion of the wave reflects back. The wave that gets around the corner, though, again, kind of rubbing the shoulder situation, and you'll end up again with this dead zone. These dead zones, it depends on the application. One of the applications with myself in an engineering background, we're looking at bridge piles or bridge abutments, and what you get is sediment deposit and stuff like that because there's no waves in this zone. So there's many applications. If you're talking about sound, where I have the no waves, you theoretically would hear no music if that's your location, but wherever I have my green lines, you would hear music. So many applications for this, and we're going to talk about how it ties into light as we move through this unit. Okay, half plane, I just did that in the previous slide. Sorry, I didn't realize it was coming. It's our bottom example here. So this is the half plane. All right, so we can zip through that. maybe you figured that out. Parabolic mirror. We don't really deal a lot with the parabolic mirror, and it's really too bad, but it's been taken out of our curriculum in the math end of it. But with a parabolic reflector, if you think of it, or if you want to visualize this, this is the kind of the design of a lot of our headlamps or light lamps on cars. Design of lamps on cars, or close to it. I mean, of course, I'm generalizing for some people that are experts in this area. I realize that. But what happens is basically inside your lamp, it's that parabolic shape, and then they place the light bulb. All right. So I do a better job with the light bulb than that. Okay. So we have this light bulb in there, and a light bulb is a source that produces light in all directions. So what it does, they place it at this location inside the parabolic or curved mirror shape. And what happens is this light then will go out in all directions. So I'm not going to draw all the light waves, obviously. I'll draw some of them. And the property, when it's at that location within the parabolic mirror, in math class, we used to talk about this as a whole unit. And you've already done this, actually, when you did in grade 10, when you did mirrors and lenses. Okay, it's your focal point. And if you put it at the focal point, what happens is the light is reflected out parallel from the headlamp. And if you think about your lights in the car, it basically produces a beam of light. Okay, it produces a beam of light, and this is why that parabolic shape reflects the waves out in a focused beam. Now you're asking, well, my light actually spreads out a little bit. It's not just a focused beam. Well, that's because the light that emanates from the light that doesn't hit the reflector is partially going to spread out. So the reason you have that kind of cone is because of the light that's not striking the reflector. The majority of the strength of your light is in this region here that reflects straight out. And then you get some peripheral light on the edges here. So you get peripheral light here and here from that, the light escaping, not striking the parabolic mirror. Okay, so kind of interesting. It's too bad we don't spend more time on it because there's a ton of applications, especially with sound waves and microphones and so on and so forth. But we don't change in medium. Now this one's kind of important for us, especially when we're talking about light, because we move light from different underwater, through paper, through thin films, lots of applications. So if you remember in the grade 11 course, we had talked about in terms of a pool. So this is going to be, let's go shallow. Let's go over here. We're going to say it's deep. So my analogy was always running through water. If you're running through deep water, all right. So here's my waves. They're running through the deep water. They're going to get to that shallow region. So any of the waves that are outside the shallow region are going to know no different. So they are going to continue at the same kind of speed. But if you run from deep water into shallow water, you're going to speed up. And we ended up with this curved shape. Now, I talked about the reason the shape was curved was because the light that's on the edge here experiences what I call kind of a friction. Half of me is in deep water, half of me is in shallow water. So the part of me that's in shallow water wants to speed up, which means my body's twisting. And because we're all linked together in a wave, that means the person beside me is going to get kind of twisted. So it's really only the person that's in the middle that gets to experience no friction. But everyone else is kind of being twisted around. All right. And then once that wave hits the deep region again, we get kind of join up again. They may not be perfectly straight because the particles are kind of at different points, but we end up with that all the water, all the wave particles returning to its original velocity. Okay, so it's a change in medium. And it'd be the opposite if we went from shallow to deep. All right, so keep that in mind when we start talking about certain concepts in light. And one of the major ones is what we call refraction. So refraction is when we strike a surface at not straight on, okay, at non-right angles. So that means that my light is going from, or my water waves are going from, and we'll keep the same analogy for now. We're going to go from deep to shallow water. So what happens if those waves, instead of striking straight on, strike at an angle like that? So here's my water waves coming in. What's going to happen to the water wave? Well, what's going to happen, and I'm going to draw in, call this my center line here. What's going to happen is if I go from deep to shallow water, I'm going to speed up. But if part of me gets in there first, then I'm going to be twisted a little bit. Okay, so if you think of it, my one side is going to go faster. So that means that I'm going to kind of be twisted in such a way that I bend in this direction. All right, so obviously this is a complete exaggeration, but that I'm speeding up. My one shoulder right here is entering the shallow zone, so it's going to speed up. So that means that I'm going to twist that direction. So my angle here, my angle there, theta, is going to be reduced, or I'm going to bend further away from that center line. So when we talk about light, we're going to be talking about not deep, but we're going to be talking about optically dense. And you might have already done this in the grade 10 class. And this is going to be optically, obviously, less dense. The flip side. And what happens is that it's like a pool. As you move to something less dense or less deep, you speed up, or you're allowed to speed up. Again, this drawing is not very well done. See if I can pull up a better picture for you so I can point at that. And you can actually see an example here that I brought up that uses the deep water, shallow water analogy. So you can see that the waves, they speed up from what we call that center line. So better idea, I guess, the way they've done it here. If that is your original direction here, as you enter that shallow water, your, in this case, right shoulder is going to hit the shallow water first, and you're going to want to twist or rotate in that direction, which then means that you are going to bend from your original course. So originally, we're heading in this direction. Now, you're heading on an angle in that direction. Okay, and that's what we call our refraction. Okay, so final part here is a quick investigation. I have this on my website, that this website address. And what you need to do is you need to go through it, and what it'll do is it'll help you fill in the chart here. If you remember Snell's law from grade 10, then you can just kind of go through and enter it. If you need a review, though, the applet is very good. What it does is it allows you to finish this up and answer the questions, and that is the homework for that next day. So you can finish this in class then and move on to a journal or whatever kind of suits your particular point in time. All right. So anyhow, any questions? You know where I am. You can get some help next day, and we'll see you in the next set of videos.